Good evening, everyone, tuning into the latest initiative for the legal community from us at IDEX Legal in partnership with Provakil. This is the second episode in our series, focusing on legal technology and the in-house community. Having kickstarted our series recently with Sandeep Chaudhary of Ola on how to use legal tech to future-proof your in-house department. Today, we build on that conversation with Navneet Hrishikesan, Senior Director, Legal and Head of Service Provider, APAC and Japan for Cisco. Navneet became a lawyer to avoid the sciences and in an ironic twist, has built a career working on complex technology matters for different companies. Navneet leads Cisco's award-winning service provider legal department for the APAC and Japan region and is proud that his team helps provide technology solutions to almost half of the world's population. He has previously worked at Wipro twice, most recently as its general counsel for the Americas, prior to which he was an associate with the London city firm Simmons & Simmons. Having worked in 3 continents, Navneet is happy to be back home in Bangalore with his wife, who's also a lawyer, 2 kids, and an equally impish dog. Joining Navneet, we have Shashwat Sikka, a graduate of IIT Kharagpur, who is co-founder of Provakil, a legal tech startup that is focused on building the next-gen enterprise legal management suite and has worked with dozens of corporates and law firms on their tech implementation strategy. Welcome, gentlemen, for today's conversation, which focuses on getting to grips with using legal technology as an in-house department. So first to you, Navneet. Legal tech's been around for a number of decades, looking at solving different business challenges. Let's go back to talking through how that's evolved over the years to date.
Sure, thank you, Vikas, and I hope I'm clear.
Yeah,
it's mandatory on the part of Cisco employees to start with a joke on Zoom, so I was going to complain about how bad she was. we will instead, go to the question that you're asking, right? So I think the really interesting thing about legal technology, if you will, or the concept of legal tech, is that it's not new, right? It's been around, well, since the 70s when LexisNexis first brought out its terminal, 73, I think it was. But the actual genesis of that company itself actually goes back to the 50s. So there was an attorney called John Horty who realized that there were too many laws on how hospitals run their operations in the states, right? Each state had its own rules. And he actually brought out some kind of a tracker where you could input it and you could track. So if you look at it from a legal tech space, right, that's very much within the scope of what legal tech is. So it's been around for a long time, but it didn't really, except for LexisNexis, which initially started with only a couple of states, the laws and the case laws of a couple of states, it didn't really take off that well, right? I think we see it slowly growing over time. And the initial people who took it on were the law firms, right? So they were using it. The concept always was, how do I improve my efficiency? So it's all largely inward focused, right? So billing matters, time management, how do you get access to certain tools or certain templates? That was the focus. And the idea was to be more a support function. And you can see this even today when you look at legal departments around the world. Legal tech sits inside legal operations, right? Usually. And so operations by definition means inward looking, right? So it's all about efficiency. It's all about how do you make it faster? How do you make it better? Now you see more areas being added, but it's still very much an inward focused usage, right? So you have knowledge management coming in, your workflow management coming in, and the like. So I think till about 2000, it was fairly slow and it was not really heavily used. I think over time, I feel it will probably grow exponentially, right? The growth in any sphere is not linear, right? There are periods when you have kind of a revolution that takes place and it goes forward. And I expect, Gartner's recent State of the Law Department survey basically suggested that in 2019, the the amount of money companies or firms were willing to spend on legal tech had increased 1.5 times since 2019, right? So you can see this really growing. I think the pandemic has kind of pushed certain trends forward, and I believe legal tech is probably on the cusp of a revolution. We can probably see it becoming more moving away from inward focus to outward focused, and you see a lot of firms out there today trying to make that happen, right, with contract drafting and the like. So I'll stop there though, because
Yeah, I mean, when you first said that, when we were chatting, a week or so ago, that legal tech goes back to 73, but now is even before that. I mean, it's pretty incredible that it's been around a long time, and what he was setting up in the 50s, 60s is what we're still trying to deal with today. We've got a lot of startups trying to look at case management and, the tracking tools and IP tracking, etc. So it's pretty incredible that it's been around 60, 70 years and we're still grappling with, those same kind of issues. So where are we? Obviously, it's been a long haul. I know for the India market, they're kind of even more late adopters than the rest of the world, rest of the developed world in terms of legal tech within, the corporate department, especially. Law firms have looked at it, but I think it's more of a kind of recent phenomenon in the last maybe 6, 7, 8 years max that legal is becoming more of a significant kind of thing to look at the departments. But where do you think we are today in the evolution of tech tools, especially for the in-house community?
Sure. I think we, if you look at there's a reason for the delay in the adoption of tools, right? And partly, why do you go and try to find a technology solution to something? You do it to make things more efficient, right? But the early adopters or the sectors of the legal profession which were more developed or had more history, right, were largely the firms, and the firms are interested in making their operations efficient, right? But given their business model, which I've always said is fairly, doesn't have a future really, the hourly billing model, so to speak, right? There is no real impetus for them to try and make that more efficient, right? So because the more inefficient you are, you probably make more money, right? So, and I realize I'm being a little unfair on some of our colleagues in law firms, but that's generally the trend. I think what's changed over time, and in India, it's been recent. I was one of the, I'm one of the old dinosaurs in the in-house community in India, because I started working in-house straight out of law school, and it was very rare for most companies to have a dedicated in-house department, right? And even if it was there, it was largely focused on secretarial or the like. So it's very rare. It's a recent phenomenon that you find lawyers being a core part of the business. But I see as the in-house departments develop and as they become more relevant to the business, and I think the pandemic, by the way, has speeded up that process, because now suddenly you need to know what's happening. Where do you open the offices? Can you ask your employees if they're vaccinated, etc., etc. I think you land up in a scenario where the in-house community will actually drive the push, right? And they will push you to be more efficient. And that's, I think, for most of the tech companies like Provakil, since you are here, there, Shashwat, I've given you a shout out. That's, for them, I think that their best clients are probably the in-house departments, right? And they are the ones who are going to push and they're going to drive future adoption. So I think it's going to be, future is bright, I would say.
Yeah, and I guess the pandemic has kind of then accelerated that trend, because while in-house departments were looking at it, there was still a reason not to really fully adopt it. But now that we've been working at home a year and a half, we can't go and get our files from the office, and you've got all these kind of complications about doing work. It's kind of forced them to look at, okay, how do we still operate and still do deals and still manage our compliances with these challenges? And I think it's one of those that now we're kind of getting used to it, that, oh, we can still work at home, we can still run a department. I mean, I know, Navneet, you run your whole, you manage so many people across the continent with a very small team physically, present there. So so it's an interesting one to look at. And Shashwat, let's just go to you on that, because obviously you've been working with developing legal tech tools, which is not an easy task especially in the India market, for the last few years. So What's been your take on, probably even where you started, you were probably looking at law firms. Most tech companies start at the law firm thing first and then kind of switch between the two, but you're kind of more focusing on in-house at the moment. So what's been your kind of take on what the market's like at the moment?
Yeah, and I'll come to the market at the moment. What I want to address is where we started, right? I mean, just adding to Navneet's point, right? I mean, we are at a stage, to evaluate where legal tech is right now, right? And what is possible today and how the industry would evolve, right? It's quite if you take a look at how business has evolved, right, over the last 2-3 decades, right? I mean, businesses have become more global, right? So while earlier you could have been running a large company in a country and having legal outsourced to a law firm, the best set of lawyers sitting out there, making sure that whenever something comes up, they give you the right advice and you move forward. We are way past that stage, right? I mean, where today, if you are, let's say, a business like Provakil, right? If today I am building legal tech, I need a crazy good legal department in-house for us to understand how do we grow, right? Which countries do we go in? How will we do business there? What is the best enterprise structure to create? How will it be seamless for our customers to, how will it be tax efficient for me to run a business sitting out of, where should I incorporate? All of those things have become, every business today has to answer those questions. You can't be a business sitting today that, okay, fine, we are a New Delhi based business, we have a turnover and so, and this is where our clients are, and I have this great law firm that knows everything that my business is all about, right? It's every 6 months. I worked at a startup here called OAO, right? And I was tasked with launching OAO in a few countries, right? I mean, I went out and set up. So when I landed there, right, we did not even know, right? And because you're in a startup, you're trying to set up business there, and legal is an afterthought, right? You go there and then you figure out, oh my God, we can't even do this business over here, right? I mean, so then you go back, call your India team, and then you're sitting with law firms in that country and understanding. So today, the nature of business is such that legal has to be a very, very integral part of it. And so having that, the model that Navneet mentioned, right? Having that model where the law firms had the monopoly on, what legal is and, how business has to be conducted, that has to go away, right? Businesses are conscious that this is a competitive advantage. If I am more efficient, right, and I'm legally better structured, that is going to be a competitive advantage in doing business, right? And that is why you see a lot of these, a lot of people like Navneet sitting in-house, right? That skill set has to be part of the business deliberation itself, right? And the other thing that has happened over the last 2 decades is how cheap it has become to develop tech, right? I mean, with cloud and everything, right? I mean, now today we, 3 years, 5 years into our, corporate journeys, we could imagine setting up a legal tech firm with the ambition of we will be selling in 100 countries in the next 3 years. That is only possible today, right? That is only possible because we are at a stage where technology development has become much more easier, much more efficient, right? And now if you overlay both of these things, right, with law firms now having to protect that, right? The earlier model in which they could be billing clients for things they've been doing for them for the last 10 years, right? And every time they bill them more, right? Because it gets a little more complex, right? That cannot work, right? The legal department now looks at it, okay, fine, we launched this business in Vietnam. This is what we did. This is the template now when we do it in Malaysia. This is the template now when we do it in. So that efficiency can only be built in-house, right? And so both legal firms have to adapt, right? Because for the legal firm that has to exist in 2035, right? They have to be much more on point. Their technology stack will have to look a lot more different. And same would be the case with, the fact that Navneet mentioned, right? I mean, a lot of these processes are moving in-house. People understand that, these things, you have to build these capabilities in-house. So now the stack is being built, right? Now we've really, in the last 10 years, we've entered the stage where, while legal tech was, maybe doing your research, maybe doing this, maybe doing that. Now you can look at legal as a function where business would demand to have a platform, to have that whole thing, where technology can really be an enabler, right? and the function could be a lot more integrated. And this is what we've seen, right? So we started out with law firms in India 3-4 years back, right? Really trying hard to sell and convince them that this could be so much more efficient. And we just realized that nobody cared, right? I mean, a lot of people did, right? I mean, and a lot of people did, right? But it is still a very small proportion of people you realize in the industry who actually are, very, very concerned about solving it, right? Whereas, you go into a company, right, and a bank or an, non-banking financial company or an insurance company, they have engineers working in the legal department solving massive problems. I've worked with banks who hire IIM grads in the legal team, right? Who hire, who have dedicated engineering teams devoted to legal, right? Because that is how big of a puzzle or a problem it is, and that is how serious they are at, solving it, right? So then, that was our moment of awakening in terms of understanding, okay, there is industry here, right? There's stuff to do here, and this is where the market for us is, because you want to work with the side of the industry which wants to invest in it, which is more serious about going deeper into it, right? And that's where I think the evolution has been and where it is headed.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point in terms of just because a lot of tech companies, when they come to India, do hit the law firm thing first, because obviously the Western model is law firms have the budgets, they'll spend, they'll invest serious, $6-figure dollar money on this stuff. But India, that I think the pool of law firms that can really invest in tech, or as you said, serious about it, you might be able to count on both hands actually. So that's where it is a small pool, and we've seen, like Navneet was saying, the kind of evolution of lawyer in-house to try and figure out business problems, because especially with more compliances and more regulations than ever before, it's becoming a big headache for corporates to manage their risk side. And that's where now tech is becoming more of a kind of enabler for them. The old adage we've been talking about for a decade about, the GC wants, a seat at the table. They've got that, they've got more responsibility. They're having to work like how the business works, which is faster and be more agile. But just trying to break down that, we'll come back to you, Navneet, on this. How do you break down that tech problem? Because when we say technology, that could mean so many different things for an in-house department, in-house counsel. It could be from going from an Excel sheet to AI ML, and it could be quite a vast spectrum. So just through your journey, because you are you're very, for the Indian market, a very tech savvy GC. I'm very comfortable with that. So what stage should an in-house department consider using technology tools, and how do we break down what actually is a technology tool?
I think that's a great question, and actually in the legal tech community, there are quite strong opinions on that, right? So you mentioned Excel, so that's Excel is probably too far away. Let's say Microsoft Word, right? All of us use Microsoft Word. Now, is that a legal tech tool, right? And so I think there is a definition problem going on there, where people are saying, no, then it has to be either consumer facing or it has to be solving a legal problem. That's all we are going to focus on, right? And that's an approach, and that's a fine approach, right? But if I look at the trend that is going on right now, right? It's most companies, when they started, they would focus on solving legal problems, right? So do I have a central repository for all my contracts? Do I have where have I done my filings for SEC or the stock exchange? Do I have that in one place? Do I have a litigation tracker, right? Do I know how many cases there are out there, right? So, and oftentimes nobody looked at that at a company level. So there have been times when I took on a new role, and there was no way for me to track how many cases were pending, right? And this is a country like the US, which is fairly litigious. Over time, we managed to get that data together because there's nobody tracking it. There's no legal department. I was the first lawyer in the US for Wipro, and there's nobody tracking it. So what you then have to do is actually go out there and find the data, right? How many cases are out there? How many have been filed against me? How do I go about doing that, right? And then you look at the strategy behind it. How do I solve it instead of waiting for a bill to come? I mean, do I first start with a budget, then you go down the path of, okay, look at the case, figure out, should I be solving it? Should I be settling it? Should I be fighting it? What do I do, right? And you try to build in some principles that you try to follow. Tech is somewhat similar in the sense you need to first, I would suggest you start with the problem that you are trying to solve, right? So there is often a tendency when something becomes a new buzzword, right? Whether it's privacy or it's 5G or whatever, that everybody says, oh, I want that as well, right? I can't be standing up and saying I don't have it. So I need a 5G strategy, even if you're not in the telecom industry, right? And it may make sense for you. If you have a large factory or your large presence, maybe a 5G network is what you need for your internal use. But it depends on where your business is. So don't go and jump for a tool just because there is a tool available. Figure out what your problem is. So if you are in a highly regulated space and you are the first lawyer walking into that company's, as an employee, maybe you start there, right? You start figuring out what are the laws that apply to me and how do I make sure that they are identified and figured out. Secondly, listen to your clients, right? Listen to your business folks and figure out from them what their pain areas are, right? I think contracting might be a problem. So I think for us, I think that's the base, right? The second thing I'm seeing as a trend that's coming out now is, and Shashwat, you may not like this, Nakshat may not like this message too much. It's the platformization of legal tech, right? So we talked about Microsoft Teams as an example, right? Where it's good enough, right? It's not the best tool around, but it comes free with Microsoft Office. So similarly, you see firms like Salesforce and Microsoft as well getting into this space, right? And so I'll give you my example. One piece that we are trying to solve right now is how do I have an oversight on the entire flow of work that comes into my department, right? The traditional approach that Cisco has always followed is to go back and look at the kind of work we do and then demarcate it, right? So we say, okay, contract management, IP protection, these are critical for us as engineering support. These are critical for us from a company perspective. So I'm going to keep that in-house always, right? Litigation, maybe not, right? Unless it's really high profile or high risk. I do need people to manage it. So I will hire, senior lawyers from law firms who are litigators, but I will not hire a whole bunch of, 150 lawyers to be a part of the litigation department in my company, right? You basically kind of demarcate it and you say, okay, these are the activities I do. But to do those kind of that demarcation, you need to start with the data, right? You need to know what kind of work are my people doing. So we did that long back. We did that about 15 years ago, and that model has been working fine. It's time now for us to relook at it. And then, here's the very interesting part. Who's paying for that platform? It's not us. It's sales. It's operations, right? Because what we are trying to do is trying to use one tool across the board. So today, if I need to find out are we meeting our numbers in pick a country, right? Vietnam. I need to have access. Well, the old style is I need to have access to I need to know who the country manager is, right? So I need to call that person and say, do you know about this? And that depends on my relationship with that person, whether they will pick up my call, right? We have now moved to a model where there is a tool. So you can go in there and you can see real time, what's the situation in this country? How did we do last year? How did we do last month? Whatever. Now, imagine if I can incorporate that with my contract management tool or my workflow management tool, right? So I don't need to go and talk to anybody to figure out what are the important deals you're seeing coming up next year. I can go look at it myself. I can look at the funnel, right? I can go into Salesforce, look at the funnel and figure out, oh, next month, there are going to be 15 deals coming in, right? And I don't have 15 lawyers to manage that. So how do I staff for it? Do I need to go out? What do I need to do? Or 2 years down the line, we're expecting the business to become, 100 billion from 50 billion. So how do I need to staff for that? So do I need to start hiring, fresh graduates now? So that kind of drives your entire strategy. And I think that's the trend I'm seeing across the board, where people are actually, it's not legal paying for it anymore, right? And I think it's exciting in many levels, but it's also, it can be disruptive for the industry as well.
So that's really going to come from the, I don't want to use the word sophisticated because it's not really the right term, but those GCs that are very much involved with the business and where the business incorporates them as kind of key value adders, to what's going on. Because I think that the legal head, the GC that's not as involved, doesn't really get the opportunity to solve those problems because they're more kind of old-fashioned or old school kind of in-house counsel. But it sounds like it's interesting because a few years ago we would never have heard GCs talking like this. Really much, okay, what's the business problem? Where's the data? How do we cut that and then figure out what's a strategy to solve that problem? And then where are we going to use tech? Because before it was such a focus on pushing paper, the litigations. So I think it's just an interesting evolution in the role of the in-house counsel as well. And then hearing you about how do we tackle these business problems.
Yeah, I mean, you go after the money, right? I mean, that's how you do it. So we brought out in 2009, I think we brought out something called a virtual approval tool. It's called VAP in Cisco. Basically, we had too many approvers all over the place, right? And that basically meant chasing them via email. Then we had the problem of tracking who approved what. Did it align with your, your playbook, all that. We moved it online. It's a very simple tool, right? It sits on a legacy IBM platform. It's a very simple tool. So it just sends you a link. You go in there, you click on it. So as a legal approver or the finance approver, they'll click on it. You can go after anybody, right? You can put anybody in there. You can put the CEO in there if you wanted to approve something, right? That simple way of doing it, and the workflow ends with an admin sitting in the relevant country, right? So if the contract is, say, in the Philippines, and the Filipino entity of Cisco is signing it, the final document, and you don't have a concern about what document went finally for signature, right? It's taken from the tool. It's approved finally, and then it only goes to the admin. That person just prints it out, gets it signed, or scans it, whatever it is, right? And it's done. That's simple. I call it simple because it's been around for 11, 12 years now, right? We've got used to it. That simple thing saved us something like $600,000 in the first year alone. And it cut down the time of approval from like 2 weeks to 24 hours. So I can get a document approved across the world wherever I need to in 24 hours, right? When you take that message to the CFO or you take that message to your CEO, that's a powerful message, right? It's money saved. Because remember, we are a cost center, right? You're the best fixed price cost center you can find, right? So if you can save money there, then I can use that $600,000 to hire a few more lawyers, right? I can do something else with it. So I think but you're right. I mean, that's only after a certain level of evolution that you do that. I think you start by showing the value of the technology, and you start by showing the value of the tool and why you're doing that, right? If you're in sales, and Shashwat can tell us this, right? Nobody gives a crap about you, right? There's nobody out there trying to save you. It's about how much money you made. You're great. Otherwise, nobody cares. So if you are able to go and show your sales clients or your engineering clients that, hey, I'm actually interested in knowing what you're doing, right? I think you'll find it much easier to get things done, right? But you need to have the mindset as well.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I know many guys in sales and even tech sales that the conversations they have about the in-house counsel about being roadblocks and taking too much time and why do they have all this complex stuff? I just want to close a deal. So I think Shashwat probably hears what you're saying there about when he was, on the sales side. Shashwat, let's just bring you in on that point as well, because obviously you've worked with law firms, you've worked with departments, you're building, an enterprise kind of system for the in-house community. But and you've seen all different kinds of in-house counsel and companies. So what would be your kind of tips on at what point in-house departments should consider using tools and how do they evolve that process?
Yeah. So I think again it depends. It depends on where the organization stands, right? I mean, and again for different types of organizations, they're at different points, right? I mean, so an organization like Cisco, I mean, obviously over decades they've digitized the entire processes. They've been running businesses globally, so there is already a lot of those systems in place, right? But so as a company, as an organization, you have to evaluate where you are. Right? One thing that each organization needs to do right now, right? I mean, they can't wait any more for this, is to digitize everything that they're doing, right? I mean, and that's what the pandemic taught us, right? I mean, whichever piece you thought that, okay, this we will do at the last, this can happen later, all of those things became a huge bottleneck to, how did business over the last 1.5 years, right? And that's what we've seen. That is why, IT service companies across the globe have their hands full, right? And the job cut out, right? Because everything is getting looked at. So one is, as a company, you evaluate where you are, right? And one, if you're not digitized, we work with a lot of really large companies here in India, where a lot of these processes are still not digitized, right? So that is one thing that you have to do, right? And which brings me to Navneet's point, which I'll also address around the platform piece, which Navneet mentioned, right? But then once you digitize, then you can look at thinking about your stack, right? I mean, how do I look at contracts? How do I look at IP? How do I look at these individual pieces, and what is important, right? So Cisco might be thinking about IP commercialization, X number of really complex things about IP. So they would really want to look at how legal tech is impacting those areas, and then layer that onto the platforms that they are using, right? A company which is just launched, let's say, an e-commerce platform, probably just needs a very simple IP tool where they're just recording information and keeping track of things, right? So the company, you need to evaluate where you are, and the ecosystem will present itself to you, right? I mean, you will realize when you know what your problems are, you will look for the right products, right? But the platform bit that Navneet mentioned is absolutely happening, right? And we're very, very cognizant of it, right? I mean, companies overall have to find a common way, right? I mean, within a company, they have to find a common way of talking to each other, right? I mean, finance cannot have its different metrics, sales cannot talk in a different language, legal cannot come in and not understand any of it, right? I mean, so that is definitely happening, and that is why Salesforce, Microsoft, ServiceNow, all of these large companies are definitely eating into a large share of even legal tech today, right? But one thing that I feel is, again, there's space for everybody, right? So again, so our approach is also very platform driven, right? And what we are offering to the market today from our vantage point is, we want to be that platform for the smaller company, right? I mean, a company that does not have the ways and means of a large enterprise, right? There is a mid-market company out there which is also dealing and struggling with the same challenges, does not have the budgets to take on a 6-month, 1-year deployment, does not have the resources, right? They might have a 2-people legal team, right? Across managing all of their matters across the globe, right? And how do you make sure that they have the same level of sophistication and tech available over the next decade? I feel that that is going to even out, narrow out, where even the smaller company will have the right tech tools, and that will be true for legal as well, right? Wherein our approach to doing this is, we are building that platform where our entry point, Salesforce's entry point was probably sales, right? I mean, that is where the dollar moves, so you get there. And now, because it's a process problem, so you're solving that process problem in finance and legal and HR, wherever you are, right? We believe that in legal there is one additional layer of complexity, wherein the process moves inside the document. I mean, if you look at all the workflow tools, whenever it goes inside the document, the tool breaks, right? I mean, that is where everybody moves it out and does everything outside the tool, and then it brings you back in, right? So the problem that the challenge that we are solving, and we believe that give us a decade, right? Give us 5 years into this thing, that today we might be the viable option for the mid-sized company, the mid-market company, from a platform standpoint, right? Because we obviously can't get their sales teams to use our platform or their other business units to use our platform. But from a legal standpoint, we will develop so much sophistication, right? Because we are looking at their challenges and problems with such depth, right? Wherein I could be the add-on layer for a Cisco for one of their pieces that is where we could have built depth in. But for a large section of these companies which are small today and will grow in size and become large, I believe that we will grow with them, and our platform will also evolve, right? But platformization is happening, right? And it's across the board, right? The smallest of the companies also today are looking at that, right? Where things have to have a common language of connecting to each other. That is why, Slack is so popular, right? I mean, the reason why it is so popular, and that if you hear Salesforce talk about their entire strategy is Slack, they say, right? And that is the power of having that common language, right, where everything can connect, and as a business you can answer questions seamlessly, right? I mean, where context from one function flows into the other function, right? That is the future of technology tools. And wherever you are building, whether you're building a HR tech solution or a legal tech or a finance tech solution, you have to have that understanding. So yeah, so that's my understanding and my 2 cents on that problem. Again, time will tell and future will tell how these things happen.
And Navneet, it sounds like an investor pitch for us, investing in the next unicorn. 5 years time. But then how do you break that down, Shashwat? Because obviously, if you're building a platform tool, and like what Navneet was saying before, a lot of people can get caught up with the latest buzzwords and fads and think, okay, right, I need this, and okay, whether it's a Provakil tool or another tool, that, oh, we need this because it's going to solve all my big problems. And we've seen it many times before. You bring the tech in, and like what Navneet was saying, you don't have the data. It takes all that time to upload the data, and then within 6 months, no one's using it, and it kind of falls apart. So, which then gives a bad rep to the tech provider, and then in-house, they're burnt. They're not going to do it again. So, what's the kind of simple guide, like how Navneet was saying, get the data, figure out the problem, and then how do you solve the problem? So, how do you kind of advise clients from your point of view on how to get started in adopting legal tech?
Yeah. And again, so I mean, when we meet a lot of clients and a lot of these in-house departments also, I mean, and everybody is curious about, how are you using AI, and what all things will be automated, how will it help in my legal strategy? And this is a common question that we get asked, right? I mean, are my outcomes going to be better, right? And while they're right at thinking it, right, thinking about it, right, because that is exactly how you should be thinking. But I feel, again, from an evolution standpoint, if you're able to solve as a legal function, first is just have respect for data, right? I mean, think in terms of data models. That is the big piece that when we go into any legal department, we spend a lot of time with them just breaking it down in terms of data, right? What is the data model that you're solving? What is the workflow problem statement that you have on top of it? If you have solved that much, right, you are at the 99th percentile, because that is where the world is, right? I mean, if you have solved that much, you're at the 99th percentile. And ML and AI and all of that fancy stuff, you cannot even use any of it till that is solved, right? And that is not solved for 99%, right? So that is where our effort today has been, right? While we do things with machine learning, we do things with artificial intelligence, but those are layered things on top, right? I mean, I am not going into a department and saying that, I have the AI powered contract management system, because that's not the problem that I'm solving for them, right? I have built I have a small R&D division, within our company, where we keep developing these models wherein, okay, we have identified these 3 problem statements. These are, again, low hanging fruits, can be done reliably using machine learning. Okay, I will give this to you, but that's not my core pitch. I don't even talk about it for 5 minutes in a 1 hour long pitch, because all of it is what you will build upon, right? I mean, first get the world digitized, get those processes automated, get those processes in place. And for legal also, it is a journey, right? I mean, process thinking, design thinking, these are hard things that as a tech vendor, we don't get paid for, right? I mean, we have to really go in and, again, funny thing, right? I mean, my co-founder Pulkit, who's the techie in the room, right? So when we sell to law firms, right, and we've sold to quite a few law firms, and some of these managing partners now are because of the fact that they've not interacted with people like, let's say, Pulkit, right, so much in their life, that today Pulkit ends up being their go-to person to call for anything tech. Whenever they are facing any challenge, they will pick up the phone and call us that we're facing these challenges. I don't think so much my team can deal with it. Can we set up a half-an-hour call and break this through? So while we don't get paid for it, we end up doing a lot of this work, and that is my answer to your question, right? How do you make sure that things are getting solved, right? I mean, see, eventually for any business, right, if I have a long-term view of the business that I'm building, I want to make sure that the 100, 200 people that I work with, they really get some value, not just perceived value, some real value out of the project that they set about doing, right? And if you're true to that, right, one thing that we've figured out is that education is important, right? You really go in, we have gone in and we have changed how revenue recognition happens inside a law firm, right? When we set up practice management systems for them, right? They were doing it all wrong, right? I mean, and it is just like any other business is what they have to understand. And they were, set up in their notions of this is how the industry has been and this is how we've done business for 20 years. Right? It's a logistical nightmare of how you're doing things, right? And when you simplify it over, a quarter or two, you just realize the value in it, right? I mean, wow, it could have been so simple, right? And that's the effort, extra mile that as a vendor that you have to go in and put in, right? So the team that we hire, the team that we build, right? I mean, we realize all of that is important, right? It's not just tech, right? It is also process and people. So we hire the account managers that we have are people with IIT and technology backgrounds who are problem solvers, who can sit with the client and actually problem solve the whole thing, right? It is not about saying that, okay, this is my product, you figure out how you will use it, right? That's how most implementations fail, right? So you really have to be solution solvers for them, right? And yeah, I mean, those buzzwords are still far away, right? Nobody's automating the lawyer, right? it's a fair distance away. Let's automate what paralegals do, right? And let's do that, right? First, and that is what we are doing, right? I mean, that is our approach to building some of those machine learning AI driven things. But focus is still on solve the data model, solve the workflow model first.
Yeah, Navneet, just throwing that back to you, because obviously Shashwat's given a kind of a good pitch on why you would use an outsourced provider to come in and look at your business problems and where tech can help solve some of those problems. But I know over the last few years, interacting with in-house departments, GCs, and I don't know how much of it is a global thing or just an India thing, but very much we'll do it ourselves. We'll build it ourselves. We can do this. We don't have to spend, and especially when in the early days of tech coming into India, we had the big, we had the kind of Thomson Reuters model, and which was 50 lakhs, no flexibility, and very expensive tools at the beginning. And then a lot of local firms and departments said we will just do this ourselves. India's rich in engineering talent. What's your kind of take on that in terms of are these problems that we should, departments should look at building themselves, or do they go to a kind of off-the-shelf provider or a kind of more bespoke provider?
Yeah, I think it depends on what the issue is, right? I think you should, if you're, it's easy to say, okay, I'll hire 5 engineers and I'll get the work done, right? But if that was easy, then, Shashwat would have told you that's very easy, right? We'll run the business like that. That's not how it's very difficult to do it that way, right? Because as lawyers, we are not really trained to even program manage things, so you then need to add on program managers or project managers who can track it for you and help you define what the actual problem is. Because sometimes the problem is not that simple to figure out, right? It's not like, that's it, that's very simple. No, it's not, right? Particularly depending on how large your organization is. So I think it really depends. It finally comes down to the money, right? So I think what you need to do is you need to do a compare. You need to figure out what's out there in the market. Does it meet your basic requirements? Once you have figured out what the problem is, right? So first figure out the basic nature of the problem. Is that a data issue? Is it an issue of access to information or whatever? You can put whatever tools you want. Sometimes that will not happen, right? And once you identify that, then you look at the various vendors out there and you see if there is a vendor that meets your requirements. And if it's not there, then you may want to consider building. My personal recommendation would be that it's easier to buy and then make them customized for you as opposed to build your own, right? You have to be if you look at it, it's only the very, very large companies that actually build their own tools, right? It's a headache. It's a problem. It's budget-wise, you sometimes overrun. It's difficult to track what's happening, and you're not expert at it, right? You don't know what the code is going to do. So I think that's a piece. That's what I would think, right? So my given where we are as an industry right now, I think probably buy is slightly more easier than build, right? That is not the case earlier. But I think the bigger issue here is from an in-house perspective, one thing that we often forget, right? So we had this issue when we were trying to bring these tools in. Say you are a lawyer sitting in an office and doing your work. Now suddenly they say, okay, tell me what your work is like so I can figure out how to automate it. What's your reaction? Right? Your reaction is hell no, right? I'm not telling you anything. So I think to a certain extent, when you're customizing the tools and you're building the tools as a GC, you need to be very clear with your team what you're trying to do, right? And the idea here is not to go in there and fire you, buy the robot and get rid of the worker. It's more to allow the worker to do the better, the more higher value jobs and take away the day-to-day drudgery, right? And make it easier for them. That's the plan. So that communication in-house with your teams and making sure that they are aware of it and they understand it, I think that's very critical. So the more you can engage them in the process, depending on the size of the company, of course, and the department, I think the better it is for you, because you will actually get, I'll be honest with you, I don't know what daily issues my lawyer in Singapore faces, right? Is she, is it an access issue? Is it a document issue? What is it? So unless they come and tell you that, it won't get solved. Now, at the same time, as lawyers, we often don't have that culture, right? We don't have the culture of coming and giving problems. It's more about, you go figure it out for yourself. And I think that's kind of the challenge there, right? So my recommendation would be, generally speaking, unless it's really niche and there's no vendor out there, I think look at buying options, look at customization options, but more importantly, take your team with you, right? Don't suddenly wake up one morning and say, okay, you know what, now we have a new platform, right? And the moment that happens, I can tell you there is concern. There is real concern within the teams, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I think that's where a lot of tech adoption, I mean, Shashwat will know many times, but a lot of tech adoption pretty much crashes at that end, where it's forced upon change, overnight, that, okay, we've got this great tool that we spent a lot of money and now you have to use it. But, that whole kind of process of using it, why it's important, and changing habits is a real challenge for teams and businesses. So just moving on to that point then, Navneet, and we'll bring both of you back onto this. That, all right, you've decided to, whether you build your own or whether you bought and customize tech tools, to help solve some of your business challenges. What are some of the kind of control risks that GCs need to be made aware of? Because you bring it in, but that's not everything solved. That's sometimes just the start of the whole journey. Once you've got the tools in. So what's your advice to GCs around that point?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that you need to keep in mind, right? So one is, the workflow is super important, right? So you need to be very clear about how that whole thing works, and you have to, go back to grade 7 computer science, right? You have to think of it like a workflow. You have to draw it out and you have to do it. I mean, and this is not just a legal tech problem, but I remember a time when I first started working, I joined a company, a UK company, as a management trainee based out of Delhi, and my boss didn't know what to do with me, so he put me in a ERP implementation program, right? And so I spent about 3-4 months in that team, and that's the black screen of death, right? It was JD Edwards, so black screen, you had to go in there and do all that. But one day we were sitting and playing around, and we were ready to roll this out. And this company is a multinational, so they had already implemented this software in 15 countries around the world. India was next, etc. The system is very simple, right? So if you wanted to buy something, non-inventory, you would go into the black screen and you would order it. And since older people don't know how to use technology, it would actually go as an email to your boss for approval. And the boss would have a simple 2 buttons, approve, reject. For 1999, this was like, fancy. This was machine learning, right? Now, here's the catch. When we were playing around with it, we realized that if you are my manager and I'm the employee raising the request, I raise the request, the email goes to you, right, from the system. But guess what? It sits in my sent items folder. Okay. And if I go to my sent items folder and I click approve, the system approves it. And not only that, it shows that my manager approved it. Right? So that was a gap in that thing that nobody figured out. It had been implemented in 15 countries, right? So we tried this out the whole night. We kept testing it. It kept doing the same thing. And finally, we raised it to the global help desk. And this is the first time I've ever seen a patch roll out that quickly, right? It came out in like 3 hours or 4 hours. They blocked it and they did everything. So you have to be really careful when you're putting a tool in place that and you need to user test the hell out of it, right? And I think, you can say Indians are more intelligent or more devious. I don't know what it is. We are good at thinking through these problems as lawyers, right? So you have to think it through that way. The second thing I will say is the more you move into the cloud, the bigger concerns are with security, right? So cybersecurity is a big issue. We have recently seen, and by the way, that's perfect, right? You go into a law firm's system and you block off their access to their documents. Perfect, they're screwed, right? Completely. And we have seen that happen to a couple of firms recently where ransomware demands were made. So I think that's one piece that you need to be very careful about. And then finally, I would say, from a control perspective, I think just define out who can do it. But first look to see what is possible in that country, right? So for example, e-signatures. The IT Act has very strict requirements as to what is allowed as an e-signature, right? Digital signature, they call it. So there's no point having a fancy tool which doesn't meet those requirements. So you have to really work through that on multiple levels. And then finally, I think you'll have to just see if it, I would suggest try it out on a trial basis first. See if it works the way it does. And then, you can always do a proof of concept, see if it works, and then you can roll it out. There was one other point, but I've forgotten what it is. So I'll stop here.
Right. Shashwat, any additional tips from your experience working with in-house counsel?
No, I think Navneet largely covered it all, right? So I think security, is people, people do not put the right requisite amount of weightage to it, right? With cloud, while everything seems so great, things can turn really ugly, right? So that is one area. And again, we are on the other end of it, right? Where because that is the thing that even we today, when we think about our products, if you'd ask me 2016, what are your biggest problems? Our biggest problems was that, we were not able to, get the NCLT data properly because NCLT was uploading, scanned cause lists, right? This is not machine readable, right? And things like that, right? But today, none of those are problems. Again, while I want to build great features and build great offerings in my product, the biggest thing that, we talk day in, day out, and, the biggest piece of investment that happens on our product is security, right? And you would be surprised of how many really large companies still don't, understand the real value of it, right? Where, there have been times where we've sat through IT audits and, we've, Pulkit is giving me a look, right? I'm talking about times where we were really small. So we were actually sitting through IT audits on our own, right? Today, we might have a team doing it. But, we ended the coin and said that they asked us a lot of questions. But if I wanted to fool them, I could have fooled them on all counts because everything was so superficial, right? It was just a checklist thing that you did. And, anybody can come in and, tell you, okay, this happens, you'll see some proofs. But I think when you're evaluating products, even after that basic evaluation of whether the product really suits your requirements or not, I think that first piece of thing that that you have to do is really invest and figure out whether there are security standards, because you're hosting legal data, right? This is contracts, this is compliances, this is the most confidential piece of information that your organization potentially has, right? So I think that is one of the biggest areas which you should be, as in-house teams or whoever's buying legal tech, right? Law firms, right? Should be evaluating, and take help of consultants if you don't have the requisite means of doing it, right? We have done implementations where a PwC has come in or an EY has come in on behalf of the client and done all of this and then given us a green signal. It took us 3 months more, but those are generally, we feel more secure, right? Because it's not as if we knew everything, right? When we deployed for a Unilever, we understood that there were 4 other holes in our applications which had to be plugged, right? You can't build software in the room, right? Your client has to work actively with you. And with security, again, the same thing happens, right? Earlier you were selling to a lawyer it was simple, whatever you knew went in, right? But the moment that first large corporation came on board, and that is when you realize, okay, the real deal is what happens behind the scenes and not, what's on the cover, right? So security, I think, is the biggest thing, and people should be really aware of it. And the rest of the things, right? I mean, that workflow example was as pertinent as it could be, right? I mean, it is so easy to think that things are happening as intended, wherein with software. So again, I think Navneet more or less covered most of what these blind spots are, and we should be really aware of it. That is why tech tools. That again, that's a side note to if there are people listening from in-house teams. That is why enterprise tools have to be expensive, right? I mean, there's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes, right? That is why Cisco is Cisco and Zoom is Zoom, right? I mean, that is why enterprise tools have to be expensive.
Right. I'm not sure who's selling what right now, because Navneet was pitching Provakil before, and now we're vice versa. But before we wrap up, it'd be good to, I mean, we've kind of mentioned some of them, but back to you, Navneet. Just if you could share confidentially some of the tech horror stories you faced or you've heard of, with regards to tech implementation, and what advice would you give to other GCs when it comes to tech adoption?
Yeah, I mean, it's so I think let me start with a little positive story, right, in terms of where tech helped, and then maybe we can look at the risks. I mean, this is obviously not an area that anybody talks about too much, right? Where it's a horror story. I think back in the day, this was probably back in, I think 2008 or so. We were in the midst of a really complicated litigation in the US, and that's where actually this really stood out for me. We had like millions of emails that we had to trawl through. It was a 7-8-year-old project which had gone bad, and there was a dispute with the customer. And the challenge was to review all the emails to make sure that they were being classified properly, right? So the discovery was the big issue. As is expected in litigation, they had sent us very, very broad litigation discovery requests, right? It would have cost us probably close to $1 million or $2 million just to have it reviewed, right, by the law firm. And this is one of the bigger law firms, the old Southern US firm. And I think I got it done for like 1/6 the price by Iron Mountain, which just ran a tool which searched the emails, right? And obviously we needed a second level review after that, because you needed to make sure no privileged information was being leaked out or whatever, right? But that really stood out for me, right? It's a very simple thing, but it's a real pain to do, right? And I think you can look at that and say, okay, that saved me a ton of money, which then led to the CFO reaching out and saying, why don't we buy this license to this thing, right? If we need it for ourselves. So that's the kind of journey that legal tech has been through, right? Now, I think most tech horror stories start with sometimes with the people, right? So there will be somebody who will do the mistake, who will, I can tell you examples of one of our largest stock exchanges collapsing because somebody pressed the wrong key on their laptop, right? And so this is back to your point, Shashwat, about IT practices, right? Instead of pressing enter, he pressed return or whatever it was, right? And the whole bloody system, instead of the data coming down, the data went back up and it completely destroyed the stock exchange it was down for like 2 days, right? And that's when you realize that the damn thing was all based on one laptop. Right? So there are things that happen where people, for budgetary reasons or the like, take a shortcut and try to save things, and it's important to get somebody to come and have a look to make sure that you are doing it the right way, right? And I think it's easier therefore when it's in the cloud, because you expect some level of protection. But yeah, security remains a huge issue. So I think that would be kind of one of my examples from that, right?
Great. Just before we sign off, we've got a point-stroke question from Janani Dinesh, who's GC down at Nevada Holdings in Chennai. So it's in the chat box. So while legal tech adoption is growing, one of the challenges that an in-house team faces is also process flow mindset of external stakeholders. For example, business partners of your entity are apprehensive about using something as simple as an e-signing solution or reviewing off Google Docs, which then leads to stepping off using the tech for an external partner and considering legal teams need to be business enablers. Despite COVID accelerated adoption, how do we address that issue? It's kind of what you both touched upon briefly, but what's been your kind of success rates? Well, how have you helped solve that kind of challenge? Because it's a very common problem.
Well, I think it depends on. So I won't tell you that all our contracts are e-signed, right? They're not. There are some customers who still insist on signing, and some of them insist on having signing ceremonies before doing it. But normally that's only for large deals, and we have encouraged our CEO to travel down a couple of times to sign contracts. But that said, I think the way I usually try to fix it, so if it is a time sensitive piece, right? I think I would actually make that case to the business partners who are interacting with the customers, right? And say, if you do it e-signature wise, it can be done in 12 hours, right? Or 6 hours or whatever it is. If you need me to print out the damn thing and courier it to you and the like, that's going to take you, X number of days, and get them to push to do that. The other piece that I often try to do is to say, okay, let's start with scanned documents, right? If you're not okay with e-signatures, let's start with the scanned documents, especially given COVID and the like. And then we'll follow up with the physical hard copies later, right? Because it's very difficult sometimes to go and convince the lawyer on the other side or in your customer's office that the thing should be done in a certain way. But you try and use that system against them, right? So you get your salesperson to talk to their salesperson or procurement person and try to push it through that way. There is unfortunately, no simple answer. And to be honest, in India, e-signatures are problematic, right? I mean, today we can do court cases, for example, via WebEx or Teams or whatever, but you still need to physically sign the wakalatnama, right? So that flow has not completely become digitized yet. And then of course you have the stamp duty issues, right, in India. So I think that remains a challenge, but hopefully that gives some idea, Jeremy. I'm not sure I completely answered the question. That is, yeah, Shashwat will be very happy to hear that. Thank you, Jeremy. Sorry.
So if I may add another point there, right, to what Navneet mentioned, right? I mean, one piece which Janani mentioned in the initial part, right? I mean, sometimes you end up doing business with stakeholders who are not as comfortable, right? I mean, so from the context, from our context as a legal service provider, legal tech service provider, I think one piece which we companies like us need to solve is we also need to take a really deep look at it, right? I mean, sometimes we end up developing solutions and we think this is how that process should run, and then not take enough, stakeholder feedback, right? So for instance, I'll give you an example, right? When you're doing contracts, right? When you're doing digital contract negotiation, at times the other party need to share that draft to their counsel, right? I mean, they might not give them access, right? So then again, the document leaves the system, and then there's stuff that has happened inside the document which needs to then come in, right? And then the flow breaks, and then you're again back to your email inbox, right? Now, to solve this, a hard problem to solve, but a contract management system today, at least, needs to be docx native, right? You need to, so let's say today, if I'm negotiating, I'm doing drafting, I'm editing the contract in the document editor that the Provakil system might have. But if somebody exports a document out, they make changes to that document and import it back in. All the changes made by the external party should be reflected in mine. So I need to understand the tools that those third parties are using, and then make sure whatever we can incorporate in terms of cross compatibility we are doing, right? So there, then your internal compliance, right? If let's say a GC, you're saying that all contracting will be done digitally. Then from your perspective, you've done everything digitally, and that sanctity is maintained, right? That is one example, right? And e-signing is, it's a large problem, right? I mean, it's a large problem. And hopefully, I mean, the stance is softening, right? I mean, you have people realizing that it's a matter of time, right? Everybody now, people who talked about Aadhaar e-sign 2 years back, like this is never going to happen, are today doing it, right? I mean, so I think some of these things are a matter of time. It will happen. The ecosystem will evolve, and some or the onus is on us, right? I mean, as legal tech vendors, right? For us to really go deep into the problem and solve it, right? So give that alternate workflow. So a workflow should there's an e-signing workflow and there's a physical signing workflow. At least think through what can you assist with in that physical workflow as well, right? So again, yeah, not a perfect solution, but needs to have a concerted effort.
We have one question from Mega, but I think it might be a bit more extensive. So what I might do, Mega, with your one is connect you to Shashwat to help, take that offline. So it's asking about more additional tools, to help with the GC M&A challenge. We kind of run out of time, but I'll connect you and then you can have that conversation offline, which I'm sure Shashwat would be happy to take.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you both, Navneet, Shashwat. It's been a very interesting conversation, starting back from almost a history course on legal tech, which I think both me and Shashwat had no idea it went back that far.
Yeah.
And 70 years later, we're still solving the same problem at times, and also just where it is today. And I think some very good practical tips as well about how to look at, tech. Tech is simply, like Navneet, you mentioned, it's just a tool to solve a problem, but you've got to figure out the problem you're solving, which then goes back to find the data first, find the business data, then figure out the problem. And then you look at which tech tools to bring on board to help you with that. So thank you so much, for your time, your kind of experience that you were sharing. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And if you'd like to watch the webinar again or share with your colleagues, peers, we'll be sharing a link to our YouTube channel. And also I'll be connecting Shashwat and the Provakil team offline to each of you to then take that conversation forward if you're looking at tech adoption within your business. Again, thank you, Navneet. Thank you, Shashwat. Good evening, everyone.